On today's episode of The Pretend GM, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Andy Behrens, who's got over 18 years of experience in the fantasy football industry at places like Yahoo Fantasy Sports and ESPN. He's the president of the Fantasy Sports Writers Association, so you know he has seen and heard all of the best work. Andy just makes fantasy football simple and fun, exactly what the game is supposed to be. We talked about his strategy in the fantasy football playoffs, what kind of players he likes to stash on his bench, and what he looks for in upside when he's looking at players. Just like you and me, Andy Behrens is a pretend GM. Man, so I always like to start this off by doing the same thing with every guest and with the audience, just doing kind of a quick reminder of what this show actually is. And this show is meant to bridge the gap between people who do this for a living, the fantasy analysts, and the people who play. Instead of, Andy Behrens coming on here and being like, hey, draft this player or start this guy, it's teaching a man to fish and teaching them how to do these things and how you think. And so I just wanted to do something a little bit different. And with that, I always like to start this off with like a big opening question. And this one is, what is an underrated or critical skill that every fantasy manager needs to win their league?
It's a good question. It's an essential question. I don't even know.
I know it's a loaded question too.
Yeah, it's a loaded question. I don't even know if this is a skill or just a trait that is a personality trait, a lack of ego, an attribute that is necessary in fantasy, and that is just like an openness to new information and a willingness to acknowledge that players change and they improve and they decline, and like a willingness to abandon a take that has not served you well, an opinion that has not served you well. I noticed this with fantasy managers, even like some of the most hardcore players in some of my oldest leagues. Man, when they take a stand on a player, it's like a decade-long stand sometimes. And analysts, occasionally, they can't wait to be proven right about a player. And it's just, I don't know, you're not going to play the game very well if you sincerely care that much about like whether I was right or wrong on a very early opinion, right? I mean, just like think about the league itself and think about, we're all amazed at Daniel Jones this year. Last year we were all amazed at Sam Darnold. The year before we were all amazed at Baker Mayfield. The year before that we were all stunned at Geno Smith. Like something shocks us every year. Many things shock us every year, and you got to be open to that, and you got to be perfectly willing to scrap an opinion that is not helping you. Just I'm thinking about myself. I have a lot of Jackson Dart this year, and Jackson Dart, when he plays, is friggin' awesome. He's like a top 5 per game scorer. I hated him in the draft process. Like I was like, oh, you are not going to fool me with a Lane Kiffin quarterback.
I was the same way, man. I was like, no way this works out. And then fantasy.
It's literally never worked out, right? Like I was like, no, yeah, I've been burned by Lane Kiffin quarterbacks before, and it's never going to happen again. And I don't know. I saw a preseason game of Jackson Dart, and I was like, oh man, I'm wrong. You just got to be willing to be wrong and admit it and move on.
Yeah, I mean, it's something for, like you said, both analysts and people who are playing fantasy managers, because it's like, I feel like you limit yourself so much when you're just like, no, this is my guy, he's going to be good. Like, just you wait. And then it's like week 12, you're still shaking your fist and you're like, well, you know what? Next year is really going to be the breakout. And like we all kind of got to that point where we did the joking thing. We're just like, never wrong, just early.
Yep.
And it's kind of like our like tongue-in-cheek way of poking fun at ourselves, but it's true. I think you have to be willing to be wrong. And I think that goes really hand in hand with what a lot of people have said on here, which is, you don't be scared of losing and going for upside, right? Like that's what ends up winning you your league so many times.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll come around to that in other answers as well. But that's really the thing. Like I don't know. It makes fantasy football kind of easy in some ways because you're going to be wrong about a lot of stuff. Like you're going to look back at drafts that you did that were successful, and you'll be like, oh my God, I blew 2/3 of these picks,
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing too, is like you have to be willing to adjust, and it's going to be a weekly thing. It's not just in the draft. Like there's so much, especially now. We're recording this Friday, December 5th. This is going to be right before the fantasy playoffs here in 2025. There's a lot of times you get to the playoffs, it's just throw everything out the window. You mentioned A.D. Mitchell. Yeah, you might be starting A.D. Mitchell over Justin Jefferson, man. Like, that's just kind of what you have to do now. So, Andy, you're already giving some great wisdom here. What I like to do is also, let's start things out by establishing who you are, how you got it set up in this industry, what you've learned along the way, and then we kind of go over like what you can teach to fantasy managers as well. So I know you have a really cool story. I know we could probably do a whole hour of it, but how did you, Andy Behrens, get started analyzing fantasy football?
I don't know if it's cool. I was a hardcore fantasy player, like in the 90s, in the pre-internet era, right? Like in the, some commissioner was producing an 8-page, league document every week and sending it inter-office mail. Like I don't know. I'm ancient. I'm old. So I've been playing for a very long time. And so fantasy already, like even in the sort of early days of the internet, just seemed like a very natural part of the sports experience for me. And then, it's like early 2000s and I'm freelance writing and I'm doing a bunch of sports writing at the time I was writing for ESPN quite a bit. I was writing for Page 2, Page 3. And it was really fun work. It was all mainstream sports features, good stuff like that. I was doing some like local stuff in Chicago too. But it was definitely a point in my career. I guess I'm back at that point in my career where I just wasn't saying no to anything, right? If anything came my way that was going to be a good byline and was going to pay, I was a little bit interested in it. And, already having like a door open at ESPN certainly helped. And I started to do some fantasy content for them, did some fantasy basketball, some fantasy baseball for them. And again, it just felt super natural to me and a very basic part of being a sports fan. But that was at a time when it really wasn't, right? Like media companies wanted to they kind of had a notion that, oh, this is going to make us some money, or there's, a level of commitment on the part of readers to this, but we don't know what to do with it. And it's a little weird. And so we're going to keep it over here in this corner and we're going to separate it from the rest of our sports coverage. Some sites still do that. But not everyone. I think it's become obviously a much more natural part of the state of being a sports fan. You're probably, if you're any kind of hardcore fan in reality, you're going to be in multiple fantasy leagues. But it wasn't like that. And anyway, I said yes to some things. I started working for them, and then when at some point Brandon Funston took an interest when early days at Yahoo for him. And I don't know, I went and met him and Brad Evans for pizza in Chicago, and we had many beers and talked about, we had one of the dumbest conversations of my life, and I got hired at Yahoo.
There you go, guys. Just beer, pizza, stupid conversation.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
That unlocks a lot of doors, a scary number of doors.
Yeah. So I know, like, when you're starting out, obviously, like, whatever, no matter what company you're at or anything, a lot of what you're doing is you're trying to give the best information you can possible, but also sometimes you might get caught up in a certain strategy or a certain, take you might get, something that you just talked about at the beginning. Was there a mistake early on that you made, or an early challenge that kind of shaped the way you analyze everything today?
I don't know if there was any one thing that shaped the way I do things. I can tell you that I'm trying to think of like some of my very early hits and misses. Certainly at Yahoo, this will seem stupid, but because now we're totally open to rookies being great immediately in fantasy at almost any position. But I remember I was the guy who liked Adrian Peterson in again, that sounds
You're so
crazy,
brave.
Right?
So brave.
I know. But like, honest to God, like there was a moment in fantasy history where just being like, I don't know, maybe we should take this guy at the top of drafts. When he was he was bulldozing people, he was bullying people in preseason. Yeah. He was amazing right away. But I swear to God, like you could do a deep dive on this online and find out that people were like, no, Chester Taylor is the Minnesota running back, and he's the guy, and we can't trust rookies. And of course, Adrian Peterson was great. We
still get that.
For
we still get the let's get him out of the field first before we crown him.
Yeah. But that was, that was like an early success. But I've had so many, I've had so many failures. I'm also like, I'm a product of the message board era on the internet. So there's nothing you can say to me online that is gonna, I don't know. It's all been said. I've heard all the insults. So I don't mind shrugging off like a bad take, bad opinion. And I also don't take a lot of victory laps on success stories either, which is why when you ask me a question like this, I go all the way back to like 2007 or some nonsense like that.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you keep everything very level-headed throughout, whether it's your analysis, the ups, the downs, and honestly, that kind of feels like you have to do it that way. Not getting too high or too low.
It's the only way to be a good player. It's not the only way to be a successful, like, sort of noisy analyst, right? Like,
sure, yeah.
I don't know. Arguably, it's not the way you wanna present yourself as an analyst, but it is how you win leagues.
Yeah, I know that. I would say a lot of the best information that I get, even as a player, or that, the information I try to give to other people, is always trying to be as grounded as possible in some sort of fact, data, trend, something like that. I know that at the end of the day, like, sometimes we will get into, I don't know, gut feeling, man. I kind of think this is what's going to happen, but you do have to stay really grounded in whatever you're doing here.
Yeah.
Now, maybe I'm asking a question you kind of already answered here, but if you had to sum up your fantasy philosophy in one sentence, what exactly would it be?
Yeah, I feel like you kind of did it earlier, right? When you were talking about the notion of, chasing upside with every pick. It would be something like, keep it fun, draft in person when you can, and chase ceilings with every pick. Because I like a couple things there. One, like, this whole enterprise is supposed to be fun, and I was cringe when I see people covering it, whether it's on social media or any other platform, and they like, they act like a finance bro. That's not what this is. That might be what some corner of the fantasy world is, right? Like, that might be, I don't know. Maybe that's more appropriate to best ball discourse or DFS discourse or something like that. But people get in, and this is something that you really learn at a place like ESPN or Yahoo. Like, people get in fantasy leagues as like, a hub, like a social network, right? It's the college buddies, it's work friends, it's high school friends, it's nonsense like that. They're not all, I don't know, 95% of the fantasy universe is not screaming at each other on Twitter, and they are not, as hardcore as some of us want to be. And it's a social and a fun experience before it's anything else. So I'm all about, like, I don't know, all my favorite leagues, all the leagues that I care the most about are either in-person drafts or we Zoom together when we draft. And, I would hate for this enterprise to reach the point where we lose that social aspect, because it's the best. It's what's made fantasy like just a really fun career for me. And then the other thing, just as a player, and this is the thing that we were discussing earlier, you're going to make so many mistakes in your draft. And I can remember years ago, for many years, I've written like articles and player profiles for Lindy's magazines, and they had asked me to like do an anatomy of a league winner write up at some point, right? And like go back and just like look at some great team I had in some industry league that won a title, and dissect how it happened. And all I wanted to write about was the fact that my draft was terrible outside of like, I don't know, two guys, right? Like, yeah. I don't know, maybe it was the Adrian Peterson year. I don't even know. But it was like AP and one other player, and I dropped, I don't know, 12 guys from my original draft. And like, but that's how fantasy football goes. That is not how fantasy baseball is played. But fantasy football is like, your team's probably going to be as good as its best player. And it's like a harsh reality in an industry where we devote so much time, and we expect people to pay so much for content, right? But really, I don't know, you nail one or two guys and you have a really good chance of winning your league.
That's honestly such a simplistic but true way to look at it, because every time we're like, oh, who ended up winning? Oh, it was the guy that drafted JSN in the third round, and now he's the wide receiver one, right? Like, that's, you're probably going to be as good as your best player. You're actually the only person that has given that line there that your team is going to be as good as your best player. And I like that a lot.
Well, I mean, again, it kind of undermines the whole fantasy industrial complex, right?
Right.
We're all out here producing content, but that is how the game is played. Like one or two players really tilt the odds in your favor to such an extreme extent. And it's not every fantasy game is like that. I mean, I play in some very deep baseball leagues where it's probably more accurate to say that your team is going to go as far as its worst player. But again, like that is just absolutely not fantasy football. I think any platform would tell you right now that the teams that have Jonathan Taylor and or Jackson Smith and Jigba are having fabulous years, and they are the best teams on the platform by far. And there's a really good chance that, it's not 100% true, but there's a really good chance that the team that's in first or second place, the teams that are going to have buys in your fantasy playoffs, have one or both of those players.
Yeah, and I'd say too, like we kind of covered a lot of things in these questions and answers here, but like so much of what you said is true, is that like there is going to be a percentage of luck that goes into it. And I know we don't always like to broadcast that and promote that, but it is true, because for the most part, everyone has the same data. Everyone is going to hear a lot of the same opinions. Everyone's got the same things in front of them. Everyone's got ADP and rankings and everything. And for the most part, it's the same. And it's just that one person that has that one conviction on that one player that pays off, right? I think that's the fun of it. Like, that's the fun of it. We're all searching for this skeleton key that's going to unlock success in fantasy football every year and every week. And then it's like, well, it stops being a game at that point if you've unlocked it completely.
Yeah. Well, the fun part of all this is actually, and this is why people should keep, clicking content and consuming content and paying for content and all that. Like, the fun stuff is just using fantasy as a sort of lens to look at the NFL and talk about the NFL and think about the NFL and just obsess over it generally as you normally would. And that's, so that's why we still care, even though your season is not actually going to be influenced by who you choose as your flex in week 12 or week 8 or whatever, or who your wide receiver 3 is. That is marginally important, if at all. But it's really fun to think about that, because it's just time spent mulling over the NFL and matchups and, developing grudges against players or analysts or whatever. I mean, that's why we all do this.
It feels like an enhanced experience, like people that go to the movie theaters, but they're sitting in like a D-box seat or like a 3D, like, you're still getting the same product, but it's a little bit enhanced for you. So Andy, we've talked about a lot about like the things that you learned along the way coming up and the way you see the game, but let's talk a little bit about what fantasy managers can learn from you. And I think from our position where we do this for a living and we get to talk to a lot of different people playing and asking questions and sometimes admitting their mistakes. What's the most common mistake that you have seen from fantasy managers that just, no matter what year it is or how many times it's been said, it just keeps happening?
I'll give you two things. And one is just generally true regardless of the time of year. And the other thing becomes, I hear it all the time around the fantasy playoffs. The first thing is just really recency bias, right? Just a vulnerability to the very last thing you saw. But I'm not even trying to bag on A.D. Mitchell. I kind of like him. I liked him in the preseason. I was wrong, and now maybe I'm right. Who knows? But like, I mean, people are coming at you right now with this idea that, A.D. Mitchell is the Jets' number one, and now he's like a double-digit target guy, and like that happened one time. It was great. It was awesome. There was a cool deep shot. He's still working with Tyrod Taylor.
I mean,
and it's still
a week ago,
Jets.
John Mechie was their number one guy.
Yes,
right?
Yes, absolutely. The clear number one, the unchallenged number one in New York. Move over, Garrett Wilson. And people really have a serious vulnerability to the last thing we saw. And one thing that we learn, this is, I hate to make comparisons to baseball or fantasy baseball, whatever, but I feel like the baseball managers understand that what happened today in a game is just not, it can be not representative at all of a player. And we don't, we don't always get that in football, right? Like whatever happened today is the total sum of that player moving forward for a lot of people, and that's a really bad way to look at it, right? Like you can't just dismiss. Somebody was asking me a question today about how bad Jaden Daniels has been against the blitz this season in his like 6 games, and he didn't even finish all of them. That guy was so good against pressure last year. Like I don't even want to talk about what you think you've seen or what you think the data says this year. I mean, that guy was a clinic against pressure last year. And I mean, that guy's young. Like we're not even talking about, whatever. Like that sort of thing drives me crazy. And it's just a bad fantasy habit. It's just a really, really bad fantasy habit. You can't let last week's data or outcomes or whatever just become the entire definition of a player. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention here is when we get to the playoffs, and I'm sure you experience the same thing, we start getting questions from readers that are like, hey, should I start T. Higgins or whoever this week? My opponent is starting Burrow, and that, like, you can't match up your lineup to an opponent. Okay, it's not real football to that extent. You can't game plan for the opponent that you are about to face. They will not lose points because of anything that T. Higgins does. You're not negating anything, and you are also in that example, you are super exposed to the Jamar Chase blow up day, right? Because your opponent's getting all those points with Burrow, and you're getting none of them. And people who use that as like a tiebreaker, or people who seriously think that it gives them an edge, that just drives me crazy. Like you are an island, and you don't have to worry about matching up to your opponent. You need to think about maximizing your own score all the time.
There's so many of those things. And I remember I used to make the mistake too, where I'd say, well, I don't want 2 players from the same offense, man, because then, I'm just really capping myself. And it's just like, well, do I like Rashee Rice? Do I like Travis Kelce? I mean, yeah, I do. Maybe not this year, but like, yeah, I do. Like I could start those guys. And
yeah, like, are you going to stop yourself from having Amon-Ra St. Brown because you've got Jahmyr Gibbs? Like, that's right. I don't know. That's working out pretty well.
Right. And so like we'll find reasons to not do things. And the other thing that you were mentioning is, like kind of just overreacting week to week. I feel like what happens, and this has bled over. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm out of line when I say it, but I feel like it's bled over from fantasy analyst to players, like managers of it, where when one thing happens, you want to be the first one to that trend so that you can say you did it first. And then the fantasy manager who's like, I picked up that guy after that 1 week. I noticed it before anyone else did. It becomes like almost like the sweetener. Like the win isn't good enough. It's that I was also first.
Yeah. It's like the old, Yahoo articles. There would always be somebody who would dive in to be the first comment, right? First.
Oh yeah.
Somebody would always do that. Like we have that impulse in the industry generally, like almost as if you have to give credit to the first person who ever said a nice thing about like Josh Allen or whatever. It's not important, and it's super unimportant to be like the first person to have a take in the spring. Like nobody's playing a league of any consequence in the spring. Nothing is getting settled then. None of us are winning any money at anything. None of us are engraving trophies, in May. It's like,
however,
it's cool.
we do all need to give you credit for Adrian Peterson's career.
yeah, exactly. The only career that I want credit for is Sam Laporta's. Like I feel like the Laporta family should give me credit for his career. Nobody else should. But like, there's not a lot of value in it. It's cool, and it's cool to be discussing football year round, and it is particularly cool to be paid to discuss football year round. That's awesome. But you don't get any extra credit for being first. Sorry.
Yeah. And it's funny because, like, I mean, there's times where I think even as analysts, we have to acknowledge, the first set of rankings that come out in May. And it's always like the article, or even like January, where we do like the articles. It's like the way too early 2026 rankings. And that we don't know exactly what it means. But I will say this, everyone's are always going to be a little bit different, for as much as even I've said it on this interview, but people say it all the time. Oh, rankings are all pretty much the same. I do think rankings are a language in a way that like everyone that writes them kind of writes them to how they interpret it. Everyone speaks it and understands it differently. Whereas some people might say, I'm going to rank this guy higher because he has upside. Others might say, I'm going to rank this one higher because the floor is there and I know what I'm getting with consistency, right? Is there is there something that you would consider maybe your North Star or the thing that sort of like guides you in how you interpret fantasy rankings and avoid like the groupthink of it all?
Yeah, rankings are a really difficult thing to talk about because they are largely unimportant. It is not what drives winning and losing in fantasy football, in my opinion. They are also wildly popular, and they click like crazy. And so there's a balance that you have to strike. Like you know there's going to be eyeballs on your rankings, and it is another way to communicate like strong feelings one way or another about specific players. So I guess I hope that people who view my ranks can come away with them with a clear understanding of like, I don't know, there might be a half dozen players in any given week that I'm just all in on or all out on. And I hope they can discern that from the ranks. I actually, I used to be I used to sort of hedge on everything, and I don't know. I think I had pretty boring, like way back in the day when Fantasy Pros was not even really a known commodity, but they were kind of quietly, putting together like accuracy ranks of experts and things like that. Like, I don't know. Like I think I won the first contest in like 2009 when nobody knew there was a contest, and listen, there were only a few dozen people in it or something like that. And no big deal. I'm not like, again, not taking credit for a thing like that. But I remember thinking that like, I don't know, I feel like my process is pretty boring. And like Brad Evans, who I was working with at the time, a really good friend of mine, I don't think he did well in the contest, but I just remember thinking, man, his ranks are so much more useful because you can look at them and like, oh my God, Brad is way out on, he doesn't like LaDainian Tomlinson's matchup. That's crazy. But like you could suss it out from his ranks, and that makes it pretty useful as either a conversation starter or just to give you something to think about as you're setting your lineup. And mine, while they may have been, I don't know, accurate according to some measurement, I don't know. I don't feel like they told a story. So I feel like I've tried to get a little bit more dramatic in the ranks if I have an opinion. That was also, by the way, those were the days when like Funston would send us an Excel spreadsheet in which we had to rank, and we had to like pull people out who were on bye and all that nonsense. And like I would never dog Fantasy Pros because they have created a tool that is essential for for ranking players. It's so much easier today than it was. I don't know. I probably make it. It's probably easier for me than it is for some of the people who are really sweating the ranks like down to the wire. But like, it's such a better tool than we used to have back in the Bronze Age of fantasy content.
I mean, I can imagine like what I'm sure you probably had to start with. It's projections, but it's also just kind of like going back and forth between depth charts, who's on the roster, who's not injured. Like it wasn't always as easy as like, oh, everyone's here, I can just kind of move them around.
Yeah. But I like you mentioned like a North Star in the rankings process. When I'm done ranking each week, I always like, I want to have it in mind that like, I really hope people, whoever I'm bullish on in a given week, Jameson Williams, I'm bullish on Luther Burden. I hope people clearly understand that I really like Luther Burden this week, and I'll go back and I might bump him a few more spots just to, just so it stands out. I tend not to be very, I don't know. I've always ranked really early. They used to want us to do that at for Yahoo purposes back in the day. So there was a time when I would rank while games were still going on Sunday, and then obviously I'm updating them throughout the week or whatever. But I do feel like it's, I don't know, it's better to be, especially the way, a lot of people I'm sure don't care to know and don't know how the Fantasy Pros tool works, but like it's, when you build your ranks each week, you can start from like whatever the expert consensus is for the week. And I have always I have always wanted to like beat that, not beat it in terms of accuracy, beat it in terms of like, I don't want to know where everybody else has a guy before I sit down to rank,
Yeah. The rankings, like you said, they are the thing that everyone wants because they kind of just, it's sort of like the make me a bicycle clown, like just do it, like do the thing, do the thing for me. And I think that's also the tough part too, is because I think what you said is really important. Like when you said the thing
I don't want to sound like I'm like the people who take it really seriously and are like hardcore and competitive about it. Like they do freaking awesome work, and it is its own skill. And I don't
Dalton,
mean to,
right? Dalton Del Don, who you're close with, like he does great in the rankings every week.
Dalton's crushing it this year, and I don't mean to sound. I'm not dismissive of it. I admire the people who really shine in that regard. But people, as you say, people just use it to communicate different things, and they, I guess we all approach it a little bit different.
That's the thing, is like, that's why for as, I don't know, self-serving as it may sound, I really love podcasts because I feel like you can actually give all the context of what you're trying to say. I'm not as great of a wordsmith on paper as I can be with just a microphone and just talking and doing conversation here, but the context that's needed a lot of times doesn't come across in rankings. And so when you're talking about like, I'm going to put Luther Burden a little bit higher so I can really get the message across that I like him more this week, sometimes that's kind of what's needed. And in that same vein, people use rankings for making their start sit decisions, right? And there's been so many times where people have asked me like, hey, your rankings say this, but when you answered a question, you said you would start the guy that you have ranked below that person, and I'll tell them, well, I like the upside of that person better. I'm going to go with upside, that's what it's going to be. What's your process when you're making a start sit decision? I know a lot of times you probably will just say, do what makes you happiest or what's most fun. But like Jamie Eisenberg, for example, says, my rankings are exactly what I would tell you. Don't ask me, just go to the rankings.
Yeah, Liz Loza used to make fun of me for this. Like people would ask single position questions on social. Like they'd just ask me this running back versus this running back. And I would just send them a link to the ranks. Cause like that is legitimately how I feel. They might not be right, but the ranks are a pretty good representation of how I actually feel about these players. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people will provide context where like, oh man, I'm a 14-point underdog this week according to projections. I feel like an underdog. I need to swing for the fences here. I might give a different response, right? Like quite often we will see one player as very reliable to get us 8 points, 10 points in a given week, and not at all a potential source for 25, right? Whereas another guy might be, I don't know, he's either going to give you 25 points or more likely he'll give you 2. But if you need a big swing, this is your guy. So like that context helps sometimes. But under normal circumstances, if it's just like a wide receiver versus wide receiver question, I sent people to the ranks, and Liz was always like, "That's so rude. How can you do that?" I'm like, well, I don't know. Like they should.
I mean, I did all the work for a reason.
yeah. I don't have like a secret set of ranks that I will give, Omar online that I don't give the rest of the world. But obviously flex questions are different. I probably being an ancient fantasy player, I probably default to running backs maybe even more than I should in flex questions. But I'm generally, again, I feel like this is a running theme, but I'm always the seek out upside where you can. So I'm generally ranking those players higher. I'm often ranking for upside more than the 50th percentile outcome, right? Which I don't know. It's just my approach. It's just a different approach. But that is where I tend to fall, and I probably fall that way a little bit more this time of year.
Okay, that was going to be my next question, is when you get into the playoffs, because I've had so many people that they get more risk averse when they get into the playoffs, where there's like, I just think, tell me a guy that's going to get me 9 points. I just need someone I can throw in my lineup.
Well, sometimes that's the right approach, right? Like you think you just have you got a better team, you're way ahead in the projections, you're the 1 seed, whatever, and I don't want to take a lot of chances. I just want to get through to the next round. That might be the right approach. But but it may not, right? Like sometimes you're not trying to hit, singles. Sometimes sometimes you're trying to clear the fence. So I do think I probably get a little bit more aggressive this time of year, and that may be a mistake. It could be that the right answer is just, set the lineup that you would set in week 4 and have the same process. But it is pretty natural to overthink things once we get into December and once we get into like can't lose weeks. But I don't think I have a radically different approach. But yeah, I think I do tend to at almost all times of year, I think I tend to hunt out ceiling.
So with that being the case, throughout the year, what about your bench? Because I know a lot of people have different strategies when it comes to the bench, especially for like stashing players for the playoffs, right? I know for so many years as a fantasy manager before doing this, my whole bench would just be, let me pack it with 4 DSTs that I know have good schedules and then a bunch of handcuff running backs and just piss off the rest of the league. Does anything change for you in terms of like how you're prioritizing bench stashes or anything like that when you get closer to the playoffs?
Yeah, no, this is a great question. And this is, it's kind of, maybe it's fantasy 101 stuff. I don't know, but like your usage of your bench and the importance of roster depth just changes dramatically as a season unfolds, right? Like week 1, week 2, I get it. You want as many playable options as possible. Maybe you want to think about the upcoming bye weeks and who's going to cover those spots. That's all really valuable. Maybe you want to have some of the boring handcuffs for your boring running backs. Fine. I get it. We got a whole season's worth of injuries and buys ahead of us, and your bench has to look a little different. When we get to week 14, week 15, and if I don't win this week, I'm done. What is even the point? I care a lot less about some of my handcuffs, and like this time of year, Blake Corum should be 100% rostered. He's not. Brian Robinson should be 100% rostered. He's not. Like you can go through the player pool and find the guys who would be top 12 fantasy running backs if anything happened to the guy ahead of them, right? There's a time and a place for Tony Pollard, but Tony Pollard is no use to you right now. He cannot help. He's, I don't know. He's going to play a bunch. He should be in the free agent pool because no winning team is going to start Tony Pollard. Like guys like that are just entirely unimportant this time of year. They have a lot of value when you have buys to cover and it's much early in the season. So this time of year, give me Tank Bigsby, give me Blake Corum, give me Brian Robinson, give me that list of players where Bashal Tutin, give me all the guys who could be absolute stars if a path is clear for them.
Yeah, I could not agree more with that. And like that's something that obviously this is going to be coming out post week 14. So this is going to be, waiver time for week 15. It's probably too late for a lot of people, but it's that lesson to know as well. Like, because I'm sure you've been talking about it. We've been talking about it is to stash early, right? Like it's still shocking to me. Like you said, Blake Corum, not rostered in 100% of leagues, Brian Robinson Jr., all these guys. Andy, the teams that are already in, because I know there's some people who, this past weekend, whatever, or this upcoming weekend, they're going to be trying to get themselves into the fantasy playoffs. But the teams that have already punched their ticket to the fantasy playoffs, like they are in, they're ready to go. Is there ever a shift in strategy that you feel like they need to make, or is it just kind of keep doing the same thing that got you here?
For the most part, you should just probably pretend it's week 8 and keep doing the things that you've been doing. But I mean, with respect to the last question, like this is the time that if there's those backup running backs out there, those understudy running backs out there that you think could actually emerge as difference makers if anything happens to the guys ahead of them, you want to add those players. And also, this is a pretty good time of year to like plot out, you mentioned like stashing a bunch of defenses on your team. This is the only time of year that I will carry 2 defenses, right? Because you'll just find 2 that pair really well together in terms of like, it's not that difficult to look ahead 2 weeks and just, like we pretty much know right now the quarterbacks that we love to see dropping back 30 times, right? Like we pretty much know the teams that we want to pick on. There are very few teams that just have smooth sail, but there's such a good defense that it doesn't matter, or their schedule ahead is just so friendly that I can just roll with them for the rest of this thing. There's a few, but not many. So this is the time of year that I will have two defenses on the roster, and I just you platoon them, right? You just like the way they pair up in the playoffs.
You mentioned that with defenses, and this is going to be true for pretty much most players, is that there's very few players where you're just saying, no matter what, they're going to be starting for me. A common thing that you always hear, especially this time of year, is start your studs, right? And you'll hear that, but how much do you actually weigh out maybe a player who's not considered, quote, a stud, but they have a really good matchup, and you're saying, man, everyone has been really productive against this team. How much do you weigh matchups versus this guy's just been good for me all year, I'm going to go with him?
Depends on the, this is the sort of question that really requires specific names, right? Like, okay. I think Justin Jefferson is a terrible conversation right now. Like, it's really hard. No, like,
it's just not a good time.
He's one of the best receivers I've ever seen. He literally, he's the NFL's all-time career leader in receiving yards per game. Like, that's how good he is. He's on a short list of the very best players to ever do what he's doing, and he's just in the worst quarterback situation in the league right now, and it is hard. He has nothing but great matchups ahead, and he is really hard to rank because last week is definitely on the table in any given matchup, right? Like 2 catches, 4 yards is definitely on the table for Justin Jefferson, and it's weird. So like if that's the kind of start your stud conversation we're having, then there are a lot of guys that I would consider, man, if I had a Christian Watson or Justin Jefferson decision this week, it's all I would be thinking about. That's a hard one.
I talk about these guys like Justin Jefferson right now, or for example, Tyreek Hill last year, as actually being the most dangerous players in fantasy football, because managers will convince themselves, I have to start them every week because this is this player, right?
Yeah.
But then, you'll kind of put out the projections or the rankings and you're like, I don't know, man, Michael Wilson's a better start this week than Justin Jefferson. I guess I kind of have to start him.
Yeah, it's tough. And of course I would always say that, Justin Jefferson facing Washington, facing the team that allows the greatest like yards per attempt in the league, that's promising. This whole season has been a real reminder though that like when you're drafting a wide receiver, you are drafting their quarterback too, and things can take a pretty ugly turn in a big hurry. And this, the Jefferson situation is just the worst of them, because there's not if we're just talking about like who qualifies as a stud by any definition, Justin Jefferson is an absolute stud. He is one of the best to ever do it. I don't know that he's going to be on very many championship rosters though, it's wild. So he's a different conversation. But if we're talking about like, a great running back in a very difficult matchup, I'm almost certainly starting that running back. Cause now we're, okay, what, like if I'm going to give Josh Jacobs, if I'm going to give Devon Achane, if I'm going to give, any of these guys at the top of the rank, Bijan, if I'm whoever, Jonathan Taylor, if I'm going to give them 20 touches in a game, I'm going to take my chances because they're better than everybody else. And those are the guys that I am not going to leave on benches. Almost anybody else doesn't really qualify.
Well, Andy, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this question, because if I'm not mistaken, you are the president of the Fantasy Sports Writers Association. Yeah?
Correct.
Okay. I wanted to make sure. No. God, no. No,
sounds like maybe you want the job.
No.
Let's talk.
Sounds like you really want this job. You've seen all kinds of analysis throughout the years. You've seen all kinds of different ways that we play fantasy football. What is one thing that you'd love to see more of? Not necessarily something you need changed or something you want gone, but what's something you want to see more of?
I'll tell you one thing that I always think during award season, and I think about it sometimes. Occasionally you'll see an analyst who hypes it. It's good to be proud of the stuff that you write. Like you should be proud of the stuff that you write. But if you are hyping the thing that you wrote by telling people how many words it is, I always cringe at that. Like, and one of the criteria that our judges use in the FSWA awards process, and I like to emphasize this with people who ask me questions about what wins things, is the length of this piece of content appropriate to the subject matter, and like, I don't know, if you're writing 8,000 word analyses in your start sit feature, like, you're not curating. Like, there's a basic responsibility to curate the player pool for people, right? If you're writing a pickups column that has 200 names, if you're starting a thread on social that says the 12 players you must pick up this week, like, there are not 12 players I can pick up this week. I'd have to drop the whole damn roster, right? Like, that's nonsense. I can pick up one guy a week. That's how fantasy works. Everybody knows it. Yeah. Like, you have to curate for people. And very often a piece of content that is 400 words, 600 words, 800 words can be much more useful, or by orders of magnitude, than the thing that is 3,000 words. I'm trying to be as general as possible here, right? Like, but man, that is what I consider one of the biggest mistakes that people make in content creation, is that they think, more words, more names is better, and you're not necessarily helping the reader if you feel compelled to just name every offensive skill player on a given team. You're not curating anymore. You're not doing the job.
Well, I think that kind of goes full circle back to what you were talking about at the beginning, which is, it's a game. It's fun. It should be. There should be some simplicity to it. We're not stock market bros doing like deep dive crazy things. Some people are, sure, but I mean, at the end of the day, like, this should be fun. It should be a game. You should be able to connect with the person that's reading, listening, whatever it is. So last thing that we do here is the previous guest gets to ask you a question, and then you get to leave a question for the next guest that I have here. And our last guest was Jay Felicio from the QB List, who...
Wonderful guy. Wonderful.
Yeah, he's okay. But this was right before Thanksgiving, and he asked the question: is mac and cheese an official Thanksgiving dish?
I will never side dish shame. That is not a thing that I will do. Whatever makes you happy, whatever pleases you. And I love some mac and cheese. I think it's a better side dish if you want to enhance it in some way. Perhaps a protein with the mac and cheese. I don't know. I'm open to a lot of mac and cheese possibilities.
There we go.
And it is absolutely appropriate at Thanksgiving. It's appropriate any day of the year.
It's appropriate on a Tuesday. It's perfectly fine. It's great. It's beautiful. So now it's your turn. You get to ask a question. It could be, obviously, as you see, very non-fantasy football related. What would your question be for the next guest that we have on here? Because you're going to be our last guest throughout the holiday season, and then in 2026, I'll come back with the next set of people. We'll probably be talking NFL draft and dynasty and stuff like that.
I actually gave that you put this in your rundown to me, and I've given this a great deal of thought. And we are heading into the Christmas season is also the time of year when people have terrible takes about Die Hard and the Die Hard series, right? Like people are dug in on Die Hard as the greatest Christmas movie, and so my question is, I want the next analyst to please rank the films within the Die Hard franchise from worst to best, and tell me which is actually the best Christmas movie among them, because it is not Die Hard. I'm here to tell you.
Wow. Okay. Planting
my
the flag.
I've been told that my worst film take, I don't even have that many film takes, but I have been told that my worst film take is that, and I like the Die Hard series, okay? The original Die Hard is not a top 3 movie in the franchise.
Okay, hold on. If you're gonna ask this question, now I need to hear your answer. I'm so curious. There's no way we can have that cliffhanger.
Die Hard 2 is also set at Christmas and is a better movie. Die Hard with a Vengeance is a more fun film. Yeah. So I actually might slot the original Die Hard number 3. It's really close. But I also really like the one where Bruce Willis shoots himself through the shoulder to kill the bad guy. That's cool too. But Die Hard 2, I think, is a better film. And again, it's set at like Christmas Eve. Come on, even if your thing, even if your shtick is you want to dig in and say that Die Hard is a Christmas movie and it's the best one, it's not even the frickin' best Christmas film in the Die Hard series.
I'm sure that the people watching and listening will just be very normal about this in the comments. And
nobody's normal about it. People
super
hate this. My family hates this take. So, yeah.
I'm as cordially as I could say, Die Hard 2 is probably my 4th favorite in the series. I'm sorry.
It's fair. It's game of opinions.
I'm being as nice as I can about it. But Andy, man, thank you so much for joining. This was a great conversation. Really fun here at the end. Just talk some movies, have some fun. Man, you're so great at what you have been doing. Can you please let everyone know everything that you are working on right now and where they can find all that work?
It's great catching up with you. It's been great talking to you. And we're lucky to have you in the industry. This is a great pleasure. They can find me these days. Dalton Del Don and I, all of our writing is at the Deep Shot, except the writing that finds its way to The Athletic. I've also been writing for The Athletic. I produce a newsletter for them, so that's been really fun. Also, the Yacht Club podcast is a little endeavor. Myself, Chris Harris. Chris is one of my oldest friends. I was going to say like in fantasy, but our friendship predates either of us working in fantasy. I've known him for a long time, and so we've been podcasting together every Wednesday. This is all the kind of thing where like you subscribe to the Yacht Club podcast and you also get all the Deep Shot stuff. You subscribe to one, you get the other. Cool. It's a big combo platter. So it's been a really fun year. So I would encourage people to check that out. We're gonna go well past the football season too. So this doesn't just wrap up when football ends.
Are there going to be definitive movie rankings, anything like that?
Chris and I have been having these movie drafts, and Chris is very aware of like films that are about to come out, and I am not. I don't even know how anybody keeps track of like other pieces of culture during the NFL season, but Chris manages to, and I'm just getting smoked in these movie drafts that we have. So there's plenty of film discussion, and I'm terrible at it.
Well, it's
also,
gonna get easier.
I've become aware that there are some major stars in the world that I am just not aware of at all, and I keep getting made fun of every time another one of them comes up, and I don't know the name.
You know what? It's fair because it happens to me too. There's always someone I'm just like, I don't know who that name is. But yeah. It's gonna get easier though. Like Netflix just acquired Warner Brothers, so all of your favorite theatrical releases will be at home within like 6 days. So you're all good.
That's
well.
fair.
Andy, man, thank you for coming on. And I know I learned a little bit more today. The audience did as well. And for everybody, thank you so much for watching or listening all the way through. For myself, for Andy, we'll see you next time. Adios.